Okay, maybe we should get started here. Welcome everyone to today's virtual session called the Toolkit for College Financial Planning During COVID Times. My name is Carol Trone, and I'm the co-director of Fair Opportunity Project, a nationally focused nonprofit with a mission to empower students to access and afford college. Let me just make sure I do a sound check here and make sure everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, thumbs up. All right, good. Okay, just a few housekeeping comments before we get started. So attendees are on mute, and we'll invite your questions in the chat for the second portion of the session when we'll do more of a Q&A. We'll be sharing the recording and the presentation materials with everyone who registered for the event. Please do let me know at Fair Opportunity Project what topics you're interested in or what needs you have. And you can leave those in the chat or contact me through our website. And I apologize in advance if you hear a whimpery little dog, because my dog for some reason is very needy right now. So working from home life. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Fair Opportunity Project was founded by two college students, Cole Scanlon and Luke Hine, who struggled to find reputable and free resources to help them navigate the college application process when they were going through it as high school students. Our website, which you can see here, serves as our portal of free information on college access. You can see on this slide the homepage and a range of resources that we have. Our URL is fairopportunityproject.org. We have visitors from every state and over 200 countries every year. And thousands of new web visitors each month. And so this definitely motivates us to keep updating our information and to constantly check the web for new, great, and free resources. So the guide that you can access on the website is our hallmark resource. And we continually are expanding it and verifying it with our team of students, advisors, and college admissions directors. It's available in 7 different languages. It's a free downloadable PDF, and it goes step by step through the college process. So it gives short and easy to read chapters. It's low tech, and we encourage schools and students and anyone joining us today to share it with others. If you're a school, post it on your website. We feel like it's something that can be shared without a lot of continual oversight. And people can share it and not be concerned that it's overly complex or full of jargon. We're also on social media, but if you use our website as a starting point, that's probably the quickest way to find our videos, our guides, and our highlighted resources. So we know it's really difficult these days to connect in person. So also through our website, you can reach us through a chat button that's in the lower right corner, email, texting, and then most recently, we've added a Discord server that is peer-to-peer. It's student-to-student information sharing. And these are all free resources. And before I go any further, I do want to give a shout out to Scott Blender, who's one of our college student team members who's helping me on this call. And I'm really appreciative of that. Our latest feature resource is Fair Opportunity X. It's a virtual course which launched in April of this year after two years of development and production in partnership with Harvard's Lab Exchange. So on this site, you can explore a variety of short videos and activities in whatever sequence you want. The link to this course you can reach very easily on our homepage and also through the Lab Exchange website. So I've worked and taught in higher education for many years, and I've seen 2 of my children go through this process. And so I know it's confusing. And my 3rd child is this fall going through it as well as a senior. So I really can personally relate to the challenges that many of you are facing. Each of us on the Fair Up team, we're committed to this work because we want to increase access to college. And I think a distinctive approach that we take is that we crowdsource, we vet, we review, and then we recommend resources from other organizations in addition to our own if we find them to be useful and student focused. So our goal is to make the college process more accessible and not just drive you to our site. So that's why we're partnering with Edmit today. Perhaps the biggest question that I hear is, what's college going to cost and how can I afford it? Too often, I think students may build their college lists and fall in love with a college before they really have figured out that cost question. I became aware of Edmit about 2 years ago when I read about the innovative approach that Edmit co-founders Sabrina Manville and Nick Dukoff were taking with this new company, Edmit. So, to be clear, I have a PhD in educational policy. So higher education financing, admissions, student success are things that I talk about and understand on the policy and research side. And this is also the deep expertise and background that Sabrina and Nick bring to this. But, parents and students, they have a right to understand this data and to make data-informed choices in a way that makes sense to them. And so that's why I reached out to Edmit to partner on this webinar today, because they've created a very accessible and clear way to understand the college costs and to compare them at the start and through every step of the financial aid application and negotiation process. So I'm really excited about what Edmit's going to share with you today, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thanks so much, Carol. I'm Seth Brecher. I'm Director of Partnerships at Edmit. And on behalf of the entire Edmit team, I want to thank Carol and I want to thank the Fair Opportunity Project for providing our team with a chance to share a presentation and a guide to help students, families, and educators find the right financial fit, especially during this unprecedented time where we're being impacted by coronavirus. This is a really good time to share this presentation as many 12th graders are building and finalizing their college list. Our families are completing the FAFSA process, and also students and families are, can you hear me now? Is it better? Yep, okay, great. Students and families are also figuring out how coronavirus is impacting the college financial process. Just a bit about my background, and then I'm gonna introduce Sabrina and Jack as well. Before I joined the Edmit team, I was an educator for 11 years in Washington, DC. And my favorite role is I taught a class called College Summit. I taught about 100 12th graders per year. It was an elective class at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. We focused on college applications, scholarships, and financial aid. And when I was introduced to Edmit, I saw the tool and I thought, wow, this is the resource that I've always needed for my students and families, but never had. And so get very excited to share Edmit with communities and also to have a greater focus on financial fit in the process. And Jack and Sabrina from our team are gonna join us as co-presenters as well.
Awesome. So I'll just jump in real quick and introduce myself. My name is Jack. I'm a third-year student at Northeastern University here in Boston. I've been working with Edmit for almost a year and a half, starting as an engineering intern, then working part-time during the school year, and now at Edmit in a full-time capacity while I take a little bit of time away from school during COVID's impact period. But really excited to kind of bring a student perspective to some of our conversation today. And again, as Seth said, we're really excited to be able to share Edmit with students and families across the country. And I'll turn it to Sabrina too as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I'm one of Edmit's co-founders, as Carol so generously introduced. My background is in higher education. I've worked as a university administrator, as an education researcher in a few different capacities. And at Edmit, among other things, I manage all of our advising and counseling services, as well as our content development and product development. So excited to be here to share a little bit about the basics and also what we're seeing in these crazy times.
Excellent. So today, during the presentation, first we're going to focus on how to estimate what you can afford as a family or how as an educator you can help your students and families determine what they can afford to pay for school. We're going to focus on net price and how to calculate it. We're going to focus on creating a financially balanced list and reviewing offers, loans, and affordability. And then ultimately, we're gonna enter into Edmit software. Jack and I are gonna do a simulation, and we're gonna focus on how you can help your students determine and evaluate financial fit. Looking at the current big picture, there's $1.5 trillion outstanding in student loan debt. 44 million Americans have student loan debt. I myself didn't finish paying off my undergrad loans till I was 40, and I have many friends and family that were in a similar position. A current survey indicated that 70% of high school seniors recently polled are questioning whether a higher education is worth the investment. Coronavirus is definitely impacting how students view college and the investment associated with it. And the average debt burden of students of color is 20% higher compared to the national average. Students of color are more likely to have trouble repaying their loans. And there's definitely, looking at all of the data and trends, there's definitely a greater need for college financial education.
Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about some of the broad statistics, but one thing we like to do is start these presentations with a little bit of an interactive poll to kind of understand the audience a little better. So I'll ask Seth to share the link that's on screen here in our chat as well. But essentially what we'll do is we'll ask a few questions. There'll be multiple choice or word cloud questions, and the results will come up on screen, and it will help Seth and I kind of tailor the presentation, Sabrina and I, excuse me, tailor the presentation a little bit as we go, and we can spend more time on the features that are most relevant to the audience. So again, this link should be in the chat shortly. And for now, I'll just open up the first question. So the first question is, which of the following best describes your role at your school? Guidance counselor, college and career advisor, administrator, a parent, a student, or other. If you're not one of these roles listed, you're more than welcome to add your response in the chat as well. We can take a look there. But for now, I'll just leave it open. Awesome. Got some first responses here. Thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate it for sure. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and leave this question open for another 30 seconds or so, and then move to the next one. Again, thank you very much for participating. It really does help us kind of inform the presentation and make it more relevant. Awesome. All right, we'll go ahead and move to the next one. The next question is, what comes to mind when you think about how students and families feel about paying for college? And this can be more general. This can be during COVID's impact period specifically. Really just, the first word or phrase that you think of when you think about it. Overwhelmed. The text shows up a little small on the left side of the screen here. Unsure and fearful. Absolutely, especially now, overwhelming. Yeah, seems to be a pretty common trend. And as Carol and Seth and Sabrina said, one of our goals at Edmit is bringing transparency to the process. And as these responses are showing, overwhelmed is a common trend, right, with finances, because there's not a lot of transparent resources about not only how to make this decision, but what the decision looks like for each student, each family, and each school on their list. So we're really excited to share some more information here as well. So we'll do the same thing. We'll leave it open for another 15 to 20 seconds or so, and then move to the next question. All right, let's go ahead and switch. So the last question is, the part of the process that COVID has changed the most for my family is blank. So A, college savings, B, college list, C, being able to visit colleges, D, making that decision, or E, another option. Feel free to add your response in Zoom chat if it's not here on the slide. Awesome. So we'll leave it open for a little bit more time here, and then I will pass the presentation to Seth.
Thanks, Jack.
Totally. All right. I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and Seth, you can start back up.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through how Edmit thinks about the elements of financial fit. And it's a bit of a mix of College Finance 101, which may be too beginner for some of the guidance counselors in the room. But we also have some little what's changed in COVID boxes. And so I'll zero in on those because obviously there's some unique aspects of this season for families as well. So here's how Edmit thinks about financial fit. Obviously, I heard a lot of, can we afford it in the chat? finding a school that has offered a financial package that fits the contribution that the family can make is obviously the first step. And that doesn't just include tuition, right? It includes other expenses that the family might incur and making sure that those are low enough to be affordable for the family. But the second piece of financial fit is kind of what happens on the other side. So is the student going to graduate with loans? And if they are, which is not a terrible thing, are those loans the right size? Are they minimal? Is the student reasonably able to expect that they'll be able to repay them based on the salary that they'll earn after graduation, and kind of confidence that they'll graduate and be able to get a job? So the first step in this process is estimating what can the family pay annually. And this is a lot of people start the process with kind of going and researching schools, right? But we really think that it's important to take a step back and do a back of the envelope calculation before you really start your research about what can the family afford to pay for college. And here are some common sources. Obviously savings, if you have a 529 plan or a bank account that you've set aside for this, contributions from parents or grandparents or other family and friends that are helping out with college. And then if the student plans to work during college, that can really chip away at the cost with a few $1,000s, every summer or during the school year if they're working 10 hours a week. And so adding up all those sources of funds gives you your contribution number. And basically, in this case, anything that the school costs above $15,000, the family will need to take in loans, either the student or the parent. Just a note on COVID, because I saw someone mention unemployment. For many families, those savings, might need to be redirected, or the value of their investments has gone down, and so the savings amount has gone down. Maybe you don't have the income that you thought you would next year, and so you're not sure that you'll be able to contribute as much to your child's education. So what few families realize is that you can actually ask colleges to take this into account when they're calculating financial aid. It's something called a financial aid appeal, or professional judgment is the kind of technical term. And really it's a situation where what you've filled out on the FAFSA is different than what's reality. You can alert the college to that fact even before you've finalized your application, or afterwards. And so I'll talk about that later. So the second step is, okay, you know what you'll contribute, but what are you actually going to pay at specific colleges? And a big part of why Edmit was founded was just, we realized how hard it was for people to understand this whole financial aid landscape. So there's the cost of attendance, and that's the cost on the website. If you go to Rutgers in this example, they have their full cost for undergraduates, and here it looks like it's $45,000. And that's a full cost. That's a full budget for 1 year. It's tuition, but also fees, room and board, books. The college has to estimate this. It's like your annual budget if you're going to be a student there paying full price. Just a note on COVID, virtual college, a lot of colleges have gone virtual, so room and board may not be relevant. Hopefully next year we're back to normal somewhat, but there may be changes in living situation. In some cases, colleges have also reduced tuition or offered subsidies to students who will be living at home and might need, laptops or other tools to enable that. So look into, specific changes that might be relevant when you're looking at that full cost. But as you'll see on the next slide, most people don't actually pay that full cost. Actually, almost 90% don't. And what's really important is what's called the net price, how much a student pays for 1 year of school after deducting grants and scholarships or the free money that you get. So the obvious question is, how do we figure out what our net price is going to be before we apply? And there's two types of ways that the net price, or that the cost of attendance, can be reduced. There's financial aid based on your financial need, and there's financial aid based on your what's called merit, which are accomplishments like good grades, other characteristics that the college is excited to reward. And many students can use a combination of both to help pay for school. It's not actually always even clear when you get your financial aid award, whether it's merit or need-based aid, but it's important to realize that there's a couple different reasons that you might get aid from a college. This season, financial aid is a bit of a question mark for families. A couple of reasons. SAT and ACT scores have traditionally been a pretty strong determinant of merit scholarships. Many colleges have gone what's called test optional, meaning they're not requiring submission of test scores because so many students are unable to take those tests. And so they're going to have to figure out how to calculate merit aid differently and how to decide who gets accepted in different ways, you know, leaning on things like GPA and other factors in the application. The other thing is that colleges are anticipating increased demand for need-based aid because of the challenges that so many families are facing financially. And so the advice we're giving is to, you know, get in early, not necessarily early admission, but make sure you're filing your FAFSA and submitting your financial aid paperwork early in the process, and also to focus on the aspects of your application that are in your control. Don't stress about the test scores, but think about what else is going to really kind of help you stand out and potentially have you qualify for scholarship or other merit aid from the school. The traditional way to research net price is through net price calculators. Edmit also has a net price calculator on our website. For schools, we call it our Edstimate, but every school is required to have their own. And the ones on the college websites are useful. They're very important to do, but they're not perfect. They're only estimates. They sometimes don't include that merit-based financial aid, which can be important for some students who have slightly higher income, but still need help paying for college. And so they're a good starting point, but not the final word. This year, net price calculators may be even more tricky to count on because historical trends may look different than what things look like this year. As I mentioned, there's likely to be an increase in need-based aid or professional judgment requests, and so schools may have to shift money towards more of that need-based aid. And on the other side, schools are also, you know, trying to figure out what's the demand going to be. Are they going to have the same number of applicants? How are they going to allocate the money that they have? And so it's really going to depend kind of on the school and what the application season looks like, what they decide to do around their pricing strategy. But net price calculators is definitely a good starting point. And then using Edmit and also honestly talking directly to the school about what you can reasonably expect is often a good strategy as well. So Seth mentioned this is the season of finalizing the college list. Here are some of the things from the financial perspective that we recommend everyone keep track of. In addition to all those things, like, do you like the campus and the coursework, and does the college have your major? Really keep track of the cost of attendance, but also the net price estimates that you're getting from different sources, the GPA and test score averages, so you have a sense of your merit compared to other applicants. What are the required financial aid forms, and also the deadlines for those, because sometimes those can be different from the application deadline. And then post-graduation outlook. Here that really means things like graduation rate, what percent of graduates are employed soon after graduation, in what industries, what are they earning? And on the next slide, I'll share some ways that you can research that. But in the COVID era, we also add a couple of things to this list. The first is college financial health. And this is something that's come into the consciousness a little bit more in the recent year because it is tough times for higher education, the same way it's tough times for families. And a lot of colleges are actually doing layoffs and struggling to meet their goals financially. And we may see, experts think we may see more mergers or even closures of universities in the next several years. So one of the aspects is not just, you know, how does this college look for me, but how does the college look stability-wise generally? And then the second thing is, how are colleges responding to the pandemic? Are they cutting their tuition? Are they closing the campus? Are they refunding room and board if the student didn't use it? The way that a college has treated its students in the last 6 months is probably indicative of how they're going to respond to big changes and challenges in the future. So this is more qualitative, but I think it's an important piece to consider for every college on the list. This is a snapshot of the type of financial health data that Edmit collects about colleges that you can find on our site. And it's actually very hard to find this information. And so we put it all together because we think it's really important for families to have access to it. We actually have a financial health score that we've modeled and assigned. And we also share things like experience with online instruction and then the reliance on international students. A college with high international student population may struggle this year because there's fewer international students applying to school in the US. The US Department of Education and Forbes also have their own financial health ratings. And then obviously a school's endowment is important because that's like a cushion that can help them get through the tough times. So the final step in this stage of finalizing your list is to think about how financially balanced is your list. And here are the things that we recommend that you have the elements of a financially balanced college list. The first is 1 or 2 private colleges that are what's called tuition dependent. So these are smaller schools that may have lower endowments, but and so they actually need students to be enrolling, and they often therefore have more flexibility on pricing for every student and can kind of work with you on a price that makes sense. Similarly, schools that compete with each other for students will often kind of look to the other ones, look to their competitors for kind of pricing benchmarks, and you can actually compare those prices against each other, and in some cases go back to a school if one is much higher. So make sure you have a couple of schools that are similar, would be looking at the same types of students, and at the end of the process, if the prices are very different that they come back with, you may have an opportunity for a financial aid appeal. Obviously, it's important to have a school that you know is definitely going to be affordable, and in many cases, that's your in-state public university or college. It may also be a college that you know has a scholarship that you've qualified for, a school basically where you know the price is right if everything else does not go the way that is planned. And then particularly for students that have financial need, there are schools that have committed to meet 100% of that need. And so you can find lists of those schools on Edmit and elsewhere, but it's important to find, just to add at least one of those that you know is very generous with students like you to the list. So once you've applied, then there's a little bit of a rest. And then once the financial aid letters come back, that's when you've got the power and you have to compare your options. And so the first step is making sure you understand what does the letter say, and figure out like, what's the actual net price? What am I going to have to come up with every year? And maybe that looks different from that out-of-pocket contribution we talked about at the very beginning. And so that's your funding gap, and that's likely to be covered by loans unless you've kind of come into some money since you started the process. And then the big question that families have is, okay, how much is too much debt to take on? And we have a benchmark at Edmit, which we call our affordability benchmark. And I think it's on the next slide, Seth, but it's, oh, not yet. It's basically that you shouldn't take more in total loans than your first year earning after college. So I'll go through that in a second, but here's a basic overview of the types of loans that are available. Federal student loans typically appear in the student's financial aid package because everyone is eligible for at least the unsubsidized loans, which are capped at at $5,500 for the first year of college, but your credit doesn't matter, and you don't need to have financial need to qualify. For students with financial need, there are subsidized loans available that the college will let you know if you're eligible, and that means that the government subsidizes your interest payments while you're studying. And then the last are Parent Plus loans. So these are not, you don't automatically qualify for them, but the requirements are easier than for a private student loan. And these are loans that the parents have to co-sign or take on, and so they're not just in the student name. Federal student loans are actually a very good deal right now. The interest rates are low, and we're seeing some of the benefits of federal student loans in that payments are frozen through the end of this calendar year for current borrowers. And so that's an example that I recommend you counsel students about, that you should always max out your federal student loans before taking private loans, because there are these protections that come into play when your income is low, or when the nation is in a pandemic, which wouldn't necessarily happen with a private lender. That said, you can only take out those $5,500 in student loans from the government. And so if your gap is bigger than that, you might need a private loan. And private student loans are, on the next slide, Seth, they're mostly, almost all, like 90+% require a cosigner. So this is where the family comes into play, and the interest rate will actually be based on the parent's credit score. And when you reach this point, you basically should shop around, get quotes from a variety of lenders, and compare the terms when they come back to choose the best one. So I mentioned our rule of thumb. Before signing on all those dotted lines, it's important to take stock of what your total loan amount's going to be, not just for the first year, but for all 4 years. If tuition continues to stay constant or go up a little bit, and your financial aid package does not go up, which it's not likely to, what's your total gap going to be, and how much are you borrowing? And we really recommend to keep it at a level at or below your estimated starting salary. And that depends on the college that you go to, right? Some colleges have just higher earnings potential on average. Sometimes that's because of the quality of the program. Sometimes that's because of their connection to the job market. Sometimes it's because they're in a major metro area. And so, the students tend to stick around there and earn more. But it also depends on your major. So I always give the example of a social worker. If the student is dead set and has their dreams set on being a social worker, that's awesome. But they probably want to look at more affordable colleges, whereas a student that knows they're going to be a computer scientist and have good evidence that they'll be employed in a high-paying job after graduation might have a little bit more wiggle room to pay a little bit more for college. So here are some of the best salary research tools out there. Edmit has salary estimates by major and by college, but there's also government tools, which are great, and various other sources. So we recommend kind of running the numbers and following that rule of thumb at the end of the process before you really make your final decision.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. Appreciate it. Want to also, as you mentioned, share Edmit as a resource. Jack and I are going to complete a simulation, but before we do, I want to provide an overview of how Edmit works. Edmit is offered at no cost through the support of our partners to both the students, families, and educators, and we'll share more information at the end, how you could access Edmit and create an Edmit account. So first, Edmit estimates the true cost of college. So overall, Edmit looks at the financial fit. There's lots of resources that look at academic fit. So students can research, does a school have the right program or major that a student's interested in? Social fit, is a student can be happy and comfortable on campus. I know when I looked at colleges, I was really only focused on academic and social fit. I thought about, the college I went to, there was somebody who I knew well, who grew up in my community, and they went there. I respected them a lot. And that was one of the reasons I applied and ultimately enrolled at the school. But I never looked at the lens, is this school going to be the right financial fit for me? And as I mentioned, I just finished paying back my undergrad loans at almost 40 years old. So Edmit takes a look at the financial fit for students and families, and educators can share this tool as well. So our proprietary algorithm helps to estimate the cost of college. I live in Pittsburgh. Right down the street is Carnegie Mellon University. The cost of Carnegie Mellon is about $75,000 a year. Fortunately, as Sabrina shared, only about 10% or so of Americans pay the quote unquote sticker price for college. Most Americans receive financial aid, either merit-based aid or need-based aid. For all schools on a student's college list or all schools that they're interested in, they could use Edmit, enter the schools into their Edmit college list, which Jack and I will simulate for you here soon. And then we will estimate the cost of college, factoring in financial aid. Edmit also helps to right-size student loans and estimate student loan amounts. Most of my students over the years, and I know myself included, did not have a clear sense of how much they would take out in total loans and how much they would pay back monthly after graduation before they enrolled in college. And when I think about other times where we take out loans, when we buy a car or when we purchase a house, I recently closed on a home. And when I purchased my home, I knew exactly what my mortgage payment was going to be monthly before I made the decision to buy the house. Edmit helps in this area as well, where we will estimate how much students and families will take out in student loans and what that monthly loan repayment will be upon graduation. And we also, as Sabrina shared, using the best data available to us, we estimate earnings by major, by school. So really looking at the ROI, the return on investment for college. I know I have lots of neighbors who have children that are in 12th grade, and I get questions all the time. Seth, what should we do? What's going to be the best investment? Well, having both the cost of college and estimating the cost of college is one piece, but also having estimated earnings by major, by school will really help a family and a student to understand the investment of the college education. So as I mentioned, Jack and I are going to have a simulation. I am going to serve as the role as the educator, and Jack is going to be the student. And during this process, we're going to look at Jack's college list and talk about which schools are the best financial fit. And it'll also give you a chance to see Edmit and how Edmit can help students and families determine financial fit as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go into our into the next phase of the process.
Awesome. Can everyone see the screen okay? Did it come through? Thumbs up, nods. Okay, awesome. All right, Seth, whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, Jack, I am really excited for us to have our second virtual one-on-one college counselor and student meeting of the year. Really appreciate it. Thanks for emailing to set up the appointment. I also want to as well thank you for joining the Edmit presentation a few weeks back. So I know you now have access to Edmit, which is really great. And I thought, you had a lot of questions about the cost of college. So I wanted, and how do you find a college that's a good financial fit? So I thought we could use Edmit as the tool to look at Edmit and talk about which schools would be a good financial fit for you.
Sounds great. Where should we start today?
Well, I think a good place to start would be within your Edmit account page. So if you can either click on profile on the top right corner, that'll put you into your account page.
Awesome.
And it looks like you already got it started. So walk me through some of the information, if you're comfortable sharing some of the information that you and your family have put into the process, that would be great.
Of course, yeah. So I did work with my parents, like you said. I didn't know my HHI at first, or my household income at first. So I worked with them to put that in. I then added my academic record information, and I'm really enjoying my computer science class this semester, so I put that as my intended major. But I'm not sure if I'm dead set on that. Can that change down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know In my experience, what I thought I was going to major in college, I actually changed about 5 times, even when I got to college. So you can absolutely update Edmit if your area of interest change across this year, and then your Edmit college list will update as well.
Awesome. So below that, I put in my test scores and my GPA as well. Feeling pretty good that I was able to take the SAT in time before COVID hit us this year. And the last thing on my profile page, I added some financial information. Again, I worked with my parents and they let me know that we had about $7,000 in college savings. We just completed the FAFSA and I got my SAR back. So put in my EFC. And again, the annual cash contribution matches that.
Excellent. I'm so glad you completed FAFSA. We always, say kind of the earlier the better with FAFSA. I know when first used Edmit, students were putting in different EFCs to see the impact of FAFSA on financial aid. So really glad that you completed the process this early on in October, and that'll give you a clear and more accurate sense of what college will cost for you. Jack, I know right now you mentioned that you're currently working at the Apple Store. You have a part-time job. One of the pieces of paying for college and ultimately potentially reducing student loan amounts are student wages. Do you plan to work in college as well?
I'm hoping to. I think either trying to find a way to continue working for Apple at a different store or finding another opportunity on campus. I'm hoping to continue working.
Well, I would say we usually estimate somewhere between $3,500 a year for part-time jobs and work-study jobs on campus to about $5,000 a year. But I know that you've had jobs before. I would feel comfortable if you put $5,000 in for your student wages.
Sounds good.
Well, very good. And I also know here in Pittsburgh that you were awarded the UPMC scholarship recently. Congratulations again. Scholarships can also, of course, help pay for college and reduce student loan amounts as well. And when we estimate, it's really helpful to know scholarships. How much was the scholarship for?
I think it was for about $5,500. So it'll definitely make a huge impact on those amounts. Can I add that here in the other scholarships field?
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
And if you apply and you're awarded any other scholarships this year, please add those as well.
Sounds good. Awesome. Where should we head to next?
All right. Well, I'd love to see your college list. I'm really curious about the schools that you're interested in applying to and seeing if they're a good financial fit.
Sounds good.
Wow.
So I've just added 3 so far, but hoping to kind of walk through them with you and kind of understand some of these numbers here.
Yeah, excellent. These look like really good choices. I like University of Pittsburgh. That's an in-state school, of course, here in Pennsylvania. University of Richmond's a very generous school, private school. And we'll talk through NYU as well. I know they have an excellent computer science program, and Google and Facebook are right around the corner from NYU. But let's start with University of Richmond. It looks like the estimate is about $23,000 a year. And oh yeah, so the cost of attendance is high. It's sort of like Carnegie Mellon here in Pittsburgh. It's almost $69,000 a year. But based on your record and your profile, it looks like University of Richmond is going to offer about $45,000 in estimated scholarships and grants, and then your estimate is about $23,000 a year. So that but almost as importantly, there's 2 other things come to mind, Jack, that I want to point out. First is the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is you should never take out more in total loans, right, across all of your years at University of Richmond than your first year earnings. And it looks like your total loan amount is going to be about $21,000 a year. And your first year earnings as a computer science major, on average for University of Richmond, is about $70,000 a year. So the rule of thumb, you definitely kind of meet that requirement or that estimate. And then if we look at estimated loan payments, $221 a month. Do you currently have any bills right now that you pay that are kind of in that range?
Yeah, it's kind of like, my cell phone bill mixed with, my Spotify or Apple TV membership. So yeah, definitely seems more manageable than NYU, for example, here.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why University of Richmond gets an Edmit financial grade of an A, which I agree with. I think University of Richmond is a really good financial fit. And I'm comfortable, I think you should continue adding that to your college list. And you bring up a good point with NYU. Let me take a closer look here. For NYU, it looks like the estimate's about $43,000 a year. Cost of attendance is almost $77,000. So you're going to get some scholarships and grants, but let's see how that is ultimately going to impact your student loans. The estimated loan payment is about $1,200 a month once you graduate. And if we look at the rule of thumb, your loan amount is actually higher, about more than almost $25,000 higher than your first year earnings. So that rule of thumb isn't really, we're not getting the right outcome there. Overall, also when I think about an estimated loan payment of $1,200 a month, when you think of an expense of $1,200 a month, what comes to mind?
That's like a rent payment, or, I'm sure that's like my parents' mortgage on the house. Like that's a really, really high number there.
Yeah, I agree. And then when you graduate, likely is a good chance you'll want to, rent your own apartment or home, or purchase your own home, and you'll have another either rent or mortgage payment. Having two can be very complicated. It looks like your Edmit grade is a B, and I'm so glad that you reached out and you wanted to talk more about NYU. I'd say anytime you have a financial grade lower than an A, we should talk about it. I think that the reason, so there's 3 Edmit grades, if you remember from their presentation, A, B, and C. C is the lowest grade in Edmit. And the reason that NYU is a B and not a C, even though the estimated loan payment is high, is because the estimated earnings are also very high, $75,000. And even compared to peer schools, that's a really high starting salary for a computer science major. So it kind of averages out. But again, for NYU, if you do apply, please continue to have conversations with myself, with your family, and the school to see if there's a way that we could reduce, increase the amount of scholarships and grants, and ultimately reduce the monthly payment after graduation.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and looking at Pitt as well here in Pittsburgh, it looks like the estimated loan payment's about $223 a month, which we've talked about is really good. Financial grade of a B. With Pitt, it's a little bit different, I think, than NYU. First year earnings are lower, right, than some of the other schools on your list. So that's why Pitt is not an A, but I do think that ultimately Pitt could be a good financial fit as well. And I think that you should continue to include within your college list. We had talked about you having somewhere around 5 or 6 schools. You have, some of the really important categories. You have a private school, a school that meets 100% of financial need. And I'll share a list with you so you could actually look at more schools that meet 100% of financial need. And you have a public school here in Pennsylvania as well. And you added NYU. I know it has that strong computer science major, but let's add a couple more schools. So you could actually go to the Discover Colleges tab.
Sounds good. Oh, wow.
And you entered, computer science is already entered, and you can enter any other information that's important to you about the college, region, size of school. And here we're starting, Edmit will recommend schools for you, right? Starting with schools that have a financial grade of an A, which is really important. And then once, you add some schools, or you start to consider adding schools to your Edmit list, you can then research to make sure these schools are both, either a good academic fit, they have, a good computer science program that you feel good about, or a good social fit, right? You could do virtual tours to learn more about the school as well. So this is a way for you to potentially add some more schools that are a good financial fit.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I went ahead and I added Clarkson, and I'll add Duquesne as well. 1 school in New York, 1 school in Pennsylvania. Keep it close to home. So let's go back to the list and see. This looks like a much better list than before. A bunch more A's on here, so that's pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other area, especially during the coronavirus impact period, is if you have some time, if you could look at the financial health of schools, just to make sure before you make what could be a lifelong commitment that the schools have good financial health. You could research that in Edmit as well. Have you had a chance to look at any of the financial health for any of the schools?
Not yet. I was thinking about doing research about University of Richmond because I don't know too much about it. It just seemed like a good financial fit. Can we do that together on the call? Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a good next step.
Sounds good.
So let's first see. I'm curious if Richmond has good financial health. So you can look here in the page. And here is the information. It looks like the financial health is high, right? And it looks like
it looks good.
Yeah, an endowment of over $2.5 billion. Also, you might be able to research, of course, again, during this coronavirus impact period, does University of Richmond, in case there are disruptions to in-person learning, University of Richmond online education. So traditionally, there is only some distance education at University of Richmond. So my recommendation would be before you enroll that you talk to the school, learn more about what they're doing during this unprecedented time to help students access information in case there's any disruptions to in-person learning.
Sounds good.
Well, Jack, I really appreciate you reaching out and us having our virtual meeting this month. For next month, look forward to if you share more research that you've done to kind of complete your college list, and we'll continue to look at financial fit as well as look at for the new schools if they're a good social and academic fit as well. And then keep up the great work and really appreciate you taking the time to connect today.
Thanks very much. Awesome. Let's go back here. Seth, I'm going to hand off the screen sharing to you for the presentation, if that's all right.
Yep.
I don't have it pulled up. Awesome. Thanks.
Well, we want to make sure to have some time for Q&A as well. And actually, if I'm going to pull up, I'm going to stop sharing here and then start again. While I'm waiting, Carol, if it works well, if there are any questions that have come up in chat, if you could share them with our team, and we look forward to starting the Q&A, and I'll pull up the presentation now.
Sure. Let's see. I want to make sure that everyone did see the response. There was a question about, is there a cost for families? I can tell you, I went on the Edmit site last night and I registered as a parent because I've got a senior, and I was able to access what you just saw without cost to me. So there's so that's definitely a no cost resource that you and your students can make use of. Okay, and then there's a question. Thanks, Jack. Who are your partners?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have more than 40 partners that we work with. It's a mix of nonprofits like Jumpstart, AFCPE, some financial institutions, and also some credit unions as well. So a really good mix. But we make sure that our partners are all mission aligned with us and with Fair Opportunity Project as well. Really focusing on empowering students who want to go to college and making sure they have the information, the tools, and the resources to get there and to succeed afterwards.
Yep. And I'll also add to the first question, if you're an educator, please visit www.edmit.me. And if you click on high schools, you can create an educator account. Once you create your account, you'll be able to simulate what a student account looks like. So you can go in, you create a college list, kind of go through the similar process that Jack and I went through, but we have a lot of additional resources as well. We have a course that includes financial education modules that you can use and share with your colleagues and students. But also you can request to activate your educator account. Once you do that, once you activate your educator account, we share more resources. So we have presentations that are focused on FAFSA and financial fit and other resources that you can share with students and families. So as a next step to get started with Edmit as an educator, you'll click on the high schools link once you go to our site.
Thanks. Okay, Sydney comments that we work with low-income students and large loans aren't a good option for them. Looking at state schools seems the best option for them. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's part of the financial balance discussion. I think one thing to note, though, is that a lot of private schools actually have more generous financial aid than the state schools would. So in many cases that I've seen, the prices actually come out kind of closer than you might think. And so don't count out the private schools, but certainly agree that minimizing loans, particularly with students that don't have, a lot of family resources behind them is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh,
I was going to jump into the next question.
Oh, sorry, Sabrina. I was just going to say, my experience as well, about half of my students were from families that were low income. And early on in the year, I would also share schools that meet 100% of financial need. So we had students that were accepted and received near or full ride scholarships to schools like Lafayette and Lehigh and Bucknell and University of Richmond. So that could be a good activity as well. If the schools are a good social and academic fit, sharing the list of schools that meet 100% of financial need. It's my favorite tool and article within Edmit's Learning Center. So when you create your Edmit account, just when you go into Learning Center, you just type in 100%, because I literally pull it up almost every day. You could type in 100% and schools that meet 100% of financial need. You can click on that, and we actually provide the list Sabrina shared earlier.
Great. Robin asks, from looking into financial aid for my children, it seems like FAFSA and CSS use students' earnings and savings against them when they apply for financial aid. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the FAFSA and CSS profile forms, which are both financial aid forms, both take into account both the parents' or kind of household income as well as students' income and savings. And unfortunately, students' assets are actually counted more heavily than parental assets, because the assumption is that most of those should go towards their education, whereas the parents might have other reasons to use that money. So yes, they're fairly comprehensive in terms of the questions they ask. The CSS profile is even more comprehensive than the FAFSA, but you will have to enter information about the students' finances also.
And then Dina asks, is there any information regarding how to fill out CSS and the FAFSA form?
So Edmit has resources, kind of guides on both the FAFSA and the CSS profile on our Learning Center that you can access even without an Edmit account. So come to our site and see what articles we have about those. We're also we happen to be having a live FAFSA chat tomorrow night with a financial expert who is just on call to answer questions that you have about the form specifically. That one's based on FAFSA. And we have financial counselors that you can talk to. That does cost money. It's $30 for a 30-minute phone call, but they can go deeper on a particular situation if you have questions about the forms. But we can share, the FAFSA chat is free. We can share the page in this chat so that if anyone wants to join, they're very welcome.
Great. There's a question, can independent college counselors use this platform? And if so, what is the cost? And then there's more. I work at a high school during the day with students and can create that account. But what about the students that I work with at night that may not have access to counseling help at their high school?
I can jump in. So we do, if you work at a high school during the day, yes, you can create that account and provide access to your high school. We'd be happy to work with you to figure out how to give access to the students you work with separately as well. So you can just come to our page and connect with Seth. Yeah, Seth, I don't know if you want to share your information, but we'd be happy to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's my email address, s.brecher@edmit.me. And we could even schedule a time to talk. And I could demo Edmit in greater detail, learn more about your students and families and how Edmit can support. And then if there's additional work that you're helping within the community at night, we'll absolutely find a way for you to be able to use Edmit as an additional resource to serve that community.
Okay, if a student applied ED to a school, early decision, but the school doesn't meet the need as indicated in the school's net price calculator, how do you handle that? Are you still obligated to attend?
I was muted. The answer is no, but this is a very good question. So basically, financial reasons are the only acceptable reason to back out of an early decision commitment. And if the school will certainly expect you to have done the net price calculator and to kind of go in with eyes open about the cost. And so they won't be very sympathetic if you're like not able to pay what the net price calculator said. But if the school doesn't meet the price that the calculator estimated, then and you have significant financial challenges in paying the costs that they provide, then you would simply have to, I guess, decline, or you might be able to do a financial aid appeal, although it's much more challenging with early decision. But especially in the case that it's very different than the net price calculator results, there may be a case for an appeal simply because they might have made a mistake if it's very different.
Okay, if anyone has a final question, otherwise I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're probably pretty zoomed out at this point of the day. Any others? Again, thanks. I felt like this gave a terrific amount of information. I really appreciate what the Edmit team has put together and how hard they're working on this issue of cost transparency. Better information gives better outcomes. Oh, there is actually one more question. I don't know if we want to. Okay, if you're hearing any admission tips specific to COVID, that might be a long answer.
Yeah, I think the answer is no one knows, and we could probably fight about it or argue what it's all going to mean, because I think no one really knows, whether what it will look like this year, just because colleges' situations are changing and students have been making different decisions based on the changing environment. So I don't have any magic bullets to share, but there's probably some tips specific to the types of colleges you're considering, which would be different.
Yeah, so I agree. Everything I see, everyone is wondering, and that's been, of course, the case this entire year, I think. Probably people on the call know FAFSA completions have been way down, and so the decision to attend a college or to commit any kind of financial obligation doesn't come for many months. So everyone should do their FAFSA. That in itself is just the first step, and it does not commit you to having to do anything, but it does allow you to get the financial aid opportunities. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned, I'll be sharing out the recording of today's webinar. You'll get the information, including how to follow up with our Edmit team here. And please don't hesitate to let me know. We're trying to run as many of these virtual sessions as we can to help people in this crazy time. And have a good night and stay well.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.